She used to wake up every morning with a plan. Her days were always full. Meetings, calls, coffee with friends, errands that never seemed to end. She liked it that way. She liked feeling needed, feeling capable, feeling alive. But that was before the accident. Before everything changed. It had been 2 years since that rainy night. The night that took away not just her ability to walk, but the life she once knew. One wrong turn on a slippery road, one set of headlights too close, and the sound of metal crashing was the last thing she remembered. When she opened her eyes again, her world was no longer the same. Doctors said she was lucky to be alive. She didn't feel lucky. They said she'd learn to walk again someday. But weeks turned into months and the feeling never came back. At first she kept believing. Therapy sessions, exercises, sleepless nights of hope. But when her fiancé stopped visiting, when friends slowly stopped calling, hope became heavier to carry. Now she spent most of her days in the small apartment she had moved into after the hospital. It was quiet, too quiet sometimes. The walls were filled with framed photos from her old life. Her smiling on a mountain hike, standing by her car, dressed up at a friend's wedding. She kept them there as reminders, though some days she wondered if they were just ghosts of who she used to be. She still smiled when people visited, though that was rare. The neighbors were kind, but she could see the pity in their eyes. That look, the one that made her feel small, fragile, incomplete. It wasn't that they meant to hurt her. It was just that no one seemed to know how to act around her anymore. Conversations always turned awkward or quiet, and eventually people just stopped coming around. But she wasn't bitter. Not anymore. She had gone through all those emotions, anger, sadness, loneliness, and what was left now was a kind of calm acceptance. Her wheelchair had become a part of her. Not something she liked, but something she lived with. She had learned how to manage on her own. She could cook, clean, move around, and even drive her adapted van. It wasn't easy, but she managed. One cloudy afternoon, she rolled to the parking lot behind her building to check on her van. The ramp had been acting strange, getting stuck halfway down. She tried pressing the button again, but it only made a clicking sound. Her heart sank. Without that ramp, she couldn't get her wheelchair into the van. That van wasn't just her vehicle. It was her connection to the outside world. She sat there for a moment, looking at the stubborn piece of metal that wouldn't cooperate. She sighed, pulling out her phone and searching for a nearby mechanic. Most of them didn't do house calls, and the few that did were either too far or too expensive. Finally, she found a small auto repair shop not too far away. The reviews said the owner was honest and kind. That was enough for her. When she called, a man picked up. His voice was calm and polite, a little rough, like someone who worked with his hands all day. He said he could come by in an hour to take a look. She thanked him, trying not to sound too desperate, though inside she was relieved. An hour later, she heard a truck pull into the lot. She looked up and saw a man stepping out, wiping his hands on a rag. He looked like someone who'd been fixing cars his whole life. Oil-stained shirt, strong arms, but a gentle expression. He smiled when he saw her and walked over without hesitation. "Hi there," he said. "You must be the one who called about the van?" She nodded. "Yes, that's me. The ramp isn't working properly. I've tried everything I could." He crouched down beside the ramp and started checking the mechanism. She watched quietly, trying not to feel awkward. Most people looked uneasy when they met her for the first time. Eyes flicking between her and the wheelchair, unsure what to say or how to act. But this man didn't seem bothered at all. He just worked, asking her a few simple questions about what happened, then went back to focusing on the ramp. After a few minutes, he looked up and said, "Looks like a small motor jam. I can fix it here, but it might take a bit of time." "That's fine," she replied. "I'm not going anywhere." He chuckled softly. Fair enough. As he worked, they started talking. Nothing deep at first, just small things. The weather. How difficult it was to find good parking. How expensive car parts had become. But his tone was so natural, so easygoing, that she found herself smiling more than she had in a long time. At one point, she noticed a small drawing tucked into the pocket of his work shirt. A child's sketch of a car with the words "Daddy's Garage" written in crayon. She couldn't help but ask, "Your kid drew that?" He nodded, a proud smile forming. "Yeah, my daughter. She's 6. She thinks I can fix anything." There was warmth in his voice when he said it, the kind that comes from love, not pride. She liked that. Most people talked about their kids in a rushed or tired tone, but he sounded grateful. When he finally got the ramp working again, he tested it a few times, making sure it was smooth. "Try it now," he said. She pressed the button and the ramp lowered perfectly. No clicking, no hesitation. For a moment she just watched it, a small wave of relief washing over her. "That's amazing," she said, smiling. "You really fixed it," he shrugged modestly. "Just needed a little care. Most things do." Those words stuck with her. Most things just need a little care. She didn't know why, but they felt deeper than what he meant. Maybe because she, too, needed that kind of care. Not pity, not sympathy, just kindness without judgment. He packed up his tools and she asked how much she owed him. He gave her a number that was far less than what she expected. "That's too low," she said honestly. He shook his head. "You've had enough tough breaks. Let's call it even." She wanted to argue, but his tone made it clear that he wasn't doing it for money. He was just good, the kind of good that didn't need attention or credit. Before he left, he said, "If it gives you trouble again, just call me. I'll come by." She thanked him, and as his truck drove off, she realized she was still smiling. It wasn't just because the ramp was fixed. It was because for the first time in a long while, someone had looked at her and seen her. Not the wheelchair, not the broken version of who she used to be. That night, as she sat by her window, she thought about the man from the garage. There had been something comforting about him. Something honest. She didn't know his story, and he didn't ask for hers. But somehow in that short meeting he made her feel less invisible. Days passed, but that moment stayed with her. Every time she used the van ramp, she remembered his quiet smile and the way he said, "Most things just need a little care." Maybe he was right. Maybe people were the same way. Then one morning, as she was about to head out for groceries, the ramp made a strange sound again. It wasn't broken, just noisy, but it gave her an excuse. An excuse to see him again. She hesitated for a while, wondering if she should really call or if she was being silly. But her heart beat faster just thinking about it. Finally, she dialed his number. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey there," he said, recognizing her voice immediately. "That ramp acting up again?" She laughed softly. "It's not too bad this time. Maybe it just misses your touch." There was a brief pause, then a quiet chuckle. "I'll swing by after lunch." When she ended the call, she realized she was grinning like a teenager. It felt strange but good. It had been so long since she'd looked forward to seeing someone. She didn't know what it meant or where it would go, but for the first time in years, she felt something stir inside her, a tiny spark of life. As she waited, she brushed her hair, changed into a soft blue sweater, and even put on a bit of perfume. It felt silly, but she didn't care. She wanted to feel normal again, wanted to feel like herself. Not the woman in the wheelchair, but the woman who could still smile, laugh, and hope. When his truck finally pulled into the lot again, she felt her heart skip. She watched him step out, that same calm confidence in his walk. He waved when he saw her, and she waved back, feeling lighter than she had in a long time. She didn't know what was happening, or why fate had brought this simple, kind man into her life. But one thing was clear, he didn't see her wheelchair. He saw her, and in a world that had forgotten how to look past what's visible, that meant everything. That afternoon marked the beginning of something she didn't expect, a quiet friendship built on laughter, small talks, and gentle understanding. She didn't know yet that this man, with his calloused hands and warm eyes, would soon fix more than her broken ramp. He would fix something she thought was beyond repair, her heart. The afternoon sun shone gently through the window, painting a warm glow across her living room floor. She sat near the window, sipping her tea, still smiling at the memory of the mechanic's visit a few days earlier. Something about him lingered in her thoughts. Not just his kindness, but the calm way he spoke, the respect in his eyes, the way he treated her like any other person. It was strange, she thought. In 2 years, she had met so many people who tried to comfort her, but very few who actually saw her as normal. Yet that man, the one who came to fix her van, had spoken to her as if nothing about her situation was unusual. No hesitation, no pity, just genuine humanity. That small thing had left a big mark. Her ramp had started making that same soft noise again. Not exactly broken, but not perfect either. She debated calling him again. Maybe it was just an excuse. But then she laughed to herself. An excuse for what? For talking to someone kind? For letting herself feel a bit alive again? By noon, she had made up her mind. She picked up her phone and called the same number she had saved under garage. When he answered, his voice had that same steady warmth she remembered. "Hey there," he said. "That van giving you trouble again?" She smiled. "You could say that. It's not serious, but the ramp sounds a bit odd." "I'll come by and take a look," he said without hesitation. "Give me about an hour." She agreed, trying not to sound too eager. When he arrived, she noticed little details she hadn't the first time. His hands looked rough but strong. His shirt was worn but clean, and his smile was genuine, the kind that reaches the eyes. He waved when he saw her, then crouched down near the van like it was second nature. As he worked, they talked more this time. She asked about his daughter, the one who had drawn that little picture she'd seen before. His whole face softened when he spoke about her. "She's my reason for everything," he said. "Keeps me going, even on days I want to give up." "You must be a good dad," she said. He chuckled lightly. "I try. She's a handful, but she's my world. I just hope she grows up knowing kindness matters more than anything else." Those words stayed with her. Kindness. It sounded so simple, yet it was the one thing she had longed for the most these past few years. Not sympathy, not advice, and just kindness. After fixing the ramp again, he didn't rush off. Instead, they sat for a while outside her building, sharing stories. He told her about how he had started his garage years ago with almost nothing, just a few tools and a big dream. She told him about her work before the accident, how she used to manage a small design company. When she spoke about her old life, he listened without interrupting, without giving that sad look people often did. He simply nodded as if her story still mattered. That small gesture meant more than he could ever know. As they talked, she caught herself laughing. It felt strange at first, like her voice had forgotten the sound of joy. He noticed and smiled. "You've got a good laugh," he said. "You should do that more often." She blushed slightly, surprised by his words. "I don't get much reason to." "Then maybe that's what we'll fix next," he replied with a wink. For a moment, everything felt light. No wheelchair, no sadness, no past. Just two people sitting in the sun, sharing a quiet connection. After that day, he began to stop by more often. Sometimes to check on her van, sometimes just to drop off something small, a cup of coffee, a box of tools he thought she might need, once even a small plant for her window. "Something green makes the room feel alive," he'd said with a grin. Each visit felt easier than the last. He'd tease her about her stubbornness. She'd joke about his messy hair. There was no pressure, no awkwardness, just comfort. But deep down, she felt something growing, something she didn't want to admit. She had promised herself long ago that she wouldn't let anyone close again, not after the heartbreak she'd already endured. Her fiancé had left her just months after the accident, unable to handle the changes. That pain had left her cautious, almost fearful of caring too deeply again. Yet this man, this mechanic with gentle hands and a quiet soul, was breaking down walls she thought were unbreakable. Not with big gestures or romantic words, but with small, consistent kindness. One day, when he came by to return a wrench he had accidentally left behind, she invited him in for tea. They sat by the window again, sunlight dancing across the room. "You know," he said softly, "you remind me of someone." "Who's that?" she asked. "My mom," he said with a small smile. She used to face everything with the same kind of strength. She had health issues too, but she never let that stop her from living. She smiled at that. "She sounds like someone worth knowing." "She was," he said, his eyes drifting for a moment. "Lost her a few years ago, but I think about her every day. She used to say life doesn't stop when something breaks. You just find a new way to move." "That's beautiful," she said quietly. "She would have liked you," he added. For a moment, the room went still. She didn't know how to respond, but her heart felt full. No one had said something so kind to her in a long time. From that day on, their friendship deepened. He started calling her sometimes just to check in. They talked about simple things, what she was cooking, how business was going, how his daughter was doing in school. She began to realize how much she looked forward to those moments. One evening, he asked if she wanted to come by the garage. "I'm teaching my daughter how to paint old car parts," he said. "Could use another creative mind." She hesitated, unsure about leaving the comfort of her home. But his invitation felt sincere, so she said yes. When she arrived, his daughter ran up to her immediately. a cheerful little girl with paint all over her hands. "Hi, you're the lady from the van," the girl said excitedly. She laughed, nodding. "That's me. Looks like you've been busy." The girl proudly showed her a small car part she had painted bright blue. "Daddy says fixing things isn't just about tools. It's about love." Those words made her heart swell. It was clear where the child got her kindness from. They spent the evening painting old car parts together, turning dull metal into colorful art. She felt free that night, laughing, joking, forgetting about her chair completely. For the first time in years, she felt part of something again. As the evening came to an end, he helped her into the van, his touch gentle but respectful. "You did great today," he said. "So did you," she replied with a soft smile. "You're raising a wonderful girl." He nodded, his voice warm, trying to show her that real strength isn't about muscles. It's about heart. When she drove away that night, she couldn't stop smiling. The garage lights faded in her mirror, but the warmth she felt didn't. Back home, she sat quietly, thinking about everything that had changed in such a short time. A few weeks ago, she had been lonely and closed off from the world. Now she had a friend, someone who made her feel seen, valued, and alive. She looked at her reflection in the window and whispered, "Maybe this is what healing feels like." But as days passed, she also began to feel something else, fear. Fear of hoping again, fear of caring too much. She told herself he was just being nice, that he probably helped everyone like this. Yet her heart didn't listen. Every time her phone buzzed with a message from him, she felt that quiet flutter she hadn't felt in years. Every time she saw him smile, it warmed something deep inside her. Still, she didn't dare to believe it could be more. Not after everything. Not when her heart still carried scars. But deep inside, a small voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't sent to fix her van. Maybe he was sent to remind her that love doesn't disappear when life changes. It only hides, waiting for someone kind enough to bring it back to life. She didn't know what would come next. But one thing was certain, her story wasn't over. Not yet. Days began to blend together, but for her, they no longer felt as lonely as before. Every few days, there was a text or a short call from him. Sometimes it was just a quick, "How's the van holding up?" or "Did you eat today?" But those small words meant more than she could say. She had started noticing little changes in herself. She smiled more. She looked forward to mornings again. Even the quiet evenings that once felt empty now felt peaceful. The world outside didn't seem as far away anymore. One sunny afternoon, she rolled her chair out onto the small patio outside her apartment. The warm air brushed against her face, and she could hear children laughing in the distance. It was a good day, she thought. She was deep in thought when her phone buzzed. It was him. "Got some fresh coffee brewing at the shop. You want to join me for a cup?" She hesitated. Going to his shop meant going out, being around people again. That still made her nervous. But something inside her whispered, "Say yes." So she did. When she arrived, the garage door was open, sunlight pouring in. He was standing by an old red car, wiping his hands with a cloth. He looked up, smiling when he saw her. "There you are," he said warmly. "I was starting to think you'd change your mind." She smiled shyly. "I almost did, but coffee convinced me." He laughed and poured her a cup from a small machine on the counter. Then coffee did its job. They sat near the open garage, sipping quietly. The smell of oil and metal mixed with the aroma of fresh coffee. It was oddly comforting. He told her about a client who brought in a car held together by tape, and she laughed so hard she nearly spilled her drink. "People really do that?" she asked. "Oh, you'd be surprised," he said, shaking his head. "Some think a car can survive on hope alone." She chuckled again, and he smiled, watching how her eyes lit up when she laughed. After that day, she began visiting more often. Sometimes she'd bring homemade snacks. Sometimes she'd just sit and talk while he worked. The garage became their little corner of peace, a place where time slowed down and nothing felt complicated. He noticed how comfortable she had become, how easily she laughed now. And she noticed the way he always listened, never rushing, never distracted. One afternoon, she was sitting there watching him fix a car when his daughter ran into the shop. The little girl had a drawing in her hand and excitement in her voice. "Daddy, look, I made you something." He bent down, his face softening immediately. "Let's see it, kiddo." The drawing showed 3 figures, him, the little girl, and her, the 3 of them standing together beside a car. She felt her heart skip a beat. The child had included her. The girl ran over, proudly holding it out. "See, that's you," she said, pointing at the small figure in the wheelchair. "Daddy says you're brave." "I think so too." Her eyes welled up, but she smiled. "Thank you, sweetheart. That's the nicest thing anyone said to me." The girl grinned. "You should come to the park with us sometime. Daddy makes the best sandwiches." He gave his daughter a playful look. "You're volunteering me again, huh?" The girl giggled. "You always say yes." He just shook his head, smiling. She's not wrong. That small moment touched her deeply. The innocence of the child, the warmth of their bond. It all reminded her what real connection felt like. A few days later, he actually asked her if she'd like to join them for a weekend picnic. She hesitated, but the memory of the little girl's bright eyes made her say yes. When the weekend came, the day was bright and calm. They met at a small park near the edge of town. Families were scattered around with picnic blankets and kids running everywhere. He had already set up a spot under a big tree and his daughter was chasing bubbles nearby. He looked up when she arrived and smiled. "Glad you came." "So am I," she said honestly. They spent the day talking, laughing, and sharing food. The little girl kept running back with new discoveries, flowers, stones, even a funny-shaped leaf. Each time he listened to her stories with patience and pride. Watching them made her heart ache in the best way. Later, when the girl went off to play with other kids, the two of them sat quietly, watching her from afar. "She's amazing," she said softly. "She's my whole world," he replied. "After her mom left, I thought I'd never figure things out. But she gave me a reason to try again." She turned to look at him, surprised. "That must have been hard," he nodded. "It was. I used to fix cars all day and come home to an empty house. But one night she asked me, 'Daddy, are you sad?' And I realized I couldn't stay broken if I wanted her to grow up strong. So I started fixing myself too." His words struck something inside her. He understood what it meant to rebuild a life piece by piece. They were more alike than she thought. For a while they just sat there in silence, the sound of laughter and rustling leaves around them. Then he turned to her and said softly, "You know, you're stronger than you think." She looked away, her throat tight. "I don't always feel that way." "Strength doesn't always feel like strength," he said. "Sometimes it's just waking up, showing up, and trying again. And you do that every single day." Those simple words broke something open in her heart. No one had ever said it like that before. Not as comfort, but as truth. When she got home that evening, she replayed the whole day in her mind. His smile, his words, the way he looked at her without an ounce of pity. It felt real. It felt human. Days turned into weeks, and soon their friendship became the best part of her life. He'd call her just to share a silly story from work or to ask what she was cooking for dinner. Sometimes he'd drop by with a fresh loaf of bread or a small box of tools she might need. One rainy evening, she called him because the power had gone out in her apartment building. He showed up within 20 minutes, flashlight in hand, already joking about being her emergency electrician. He helped her light candles, check the switches, and made sure she was safe before leaving. Before he left, he paused by the door. "You're okay now?" She nodded. "Thanks to you." He smiled faintly. "Good, I worry sometimes." "About me?" she asked softly. He met her eyes. "Yeah." She didn't know what to say. Her heart raced, and for a moment the world seemed to pause. There was something unspoken in the air, something gentle but real. But before either of them could say anything more, his phone buzzed. It was his daughter calling to say goodnight. He smiled apologetically. "Duty calls." She smiled back, hiding her emotions. "Go be a good dad." After he left, she sat in the candlelight, her mind spinning. She knew what her heart was beginning to feel, but she was terrified of it. Love had hurt her once before, and she wasn't sure she could survive that again. The next day, when he came by to check her van, she tried to act normal. But he noticed the distance. "You're quiet today," he said gently. "Just tired," she lied. He didn't push her. He simply worked in silence, his calm presence filling the space. When he was done, he handed her the keys and said, "You know, you don't have to be okay all the time." She smiled weakly. "Old habits," he nodded knowingly. "Yeah, I know those." As he packed his tools, she watched him quietly. Every movement of his hands, every thoughtful pause, it all reminded her how much she had come to depend on his presence. Not out of need, but out of something deeper, That night she couldn't sleep. She lay awake listening to the rain, thinking about how strange life could be. 2 years ago she had lost everything. She had been convinced she would never feel whole again. Yet here she was, her heart quietly stitching itself back together, one kind gesture at a time. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew one thing for sure. This man had become part of her story. He had seen her not for her wheelchair or her past, but for the woman she still was inside, and somehow that simple truth was enough to make her believe in new beginnings again. What she didn't realize was that he felt the same way. Every time he saw her, he saw courage, not weakness. He saw a woman who had faced life storms and still found the strength to smile. Neither of them had said the words out loud, but both of them felt it. That quiet, gentle pull between two hearts that had been broken before and were slowly learning how to heal together. And though neither of them knew it yet, their story was only just beginning. The days were starting to feel brighter, and so was her heart. Life had a rhythm again. The quiet mornings that once made her feel empty now felt peaceful. She had started to wake up with a sense of purpose, even if that purpose was as simple as sharing a cup of coffee with someone who made her smile. He had become a part of her days in the most natural way. Sometimes they met at the garage. Sometimes he'd stop by after work just to talk for a few minutes. He'd always bring something small, a flower his daughter had picked, a piece of cake from the bakery, or a new story that made her laugh until her cheeks hurt. They never spoke about what they were to each other, but they didn't need to. Their bond had its own language. A glance, a smile, a shared silence. It all spoke louder than words. One evening he came by and found her sitting outside watching the sunset. He leaned against the railing beside her, his face soft in the golden light. "Beautiful evening," he said. "It is," she replied. "I used to watch sunsets from my car on long drives. Now I just watch them from here." He looked at her for a moment. "Maybe someday you'll watch one with me from somewhere else." "The ocean, maybe," she smiled. "You'd have to carry me down to the sand." He grinned. "Then I'll get stronger." She laughed quietly, her heart skipping at his words. It was playful, but something about the way he said it made her feel safe, seen and cared for in a way she hadn't felt in years. As days passed, their closeness deepened. They started texting late at night, sharing random thoughts or funny pictures. She began to realize that he had become her favorite part of every day. But with that warmth came fear. The fear she had buried long ago began to rise again. What if he only felt sorry for her? What if this kindness was nothing more than pity wrapped in friendship? She tried to silence those thoughts, but they grew louder the more she cared. One afternoon, while she was helping him sort through boxes in his garage, he looked at her and said, "There's a small festival downtown next weekend. They'll have music, food, fireworks. You should come." Her heart jumped. The idea thrilled and scared her at the same time. She hadn't gone to any public event since the accident. Crowds made her nervous. The looks, the whispers, it was all too much. "I don't know," she said softly. "That's a lot of people." He smiled gently. "Then we'll stay on the edge. Just the two of us. You'll like it." She looked into his eyes and saw no judgment there, only care. So she agreed. When the evening came, she almost changed her mind. She stared at herself in the mirror, trying to decide if she looked okay. She wore a simple blue dress and a soft scarf. Her hands trembled slightly as she fixed her hair. She told herself not to expect too much, that it was just a friendly outing. When he arrived, his truck was freshly washed, and there were 2 small cups of coffee in the holder. "You look perfect," he said, his voice calm and genuine. Her heart softened. "You always say the right thing," he smiled. "Only when it's true." The festival lights glowed in the distance as they arrived. Music filled the air, and the smell of roasted corn and sweet pastries surrounded them. People laughed, children ran past, and everything felt alive. He kept close to her, guiding her through the crowd carefully. Every now and then, someone would glance at her wheelchair, but he didn't seem to notice, or maybe he just didn't care. He kept talking to her, making her laugh, keeping her focus on the joy around them instead of the stares. For a while, she forgot about everything else. They shared food, watched a magician perform, and listened to a small band play soft music under the lights. It was the kind of night she thought she'd never have again. When the fireworks began, he leaned close and whispered, "Want to dance?" She looked at him, surprised. "Dance? I can't exactly." He smiled gently. "You don't have to stand to dance. Just move with the music." At first she hesitated, but then she let herself go. He held her hands lightly as they swayed to the rhythm. She felt weightless, as if for a few moments the wheelchair didn't exist. Just the two of them under a sky of colors, lost in a quiet moment of happiness. But then she noticed the people around them. A few were staring, whispering. One woman pointed discreetly and another man smiled awkwardly as if trying to hide pity. The warmth in her chest faded. The old feelings rushed back, the shame, the fear, the invisible wall between her and everyone else. She pulled her hands away. "I think we should go," she said softly. He frowned, confused. "Did something happen?" "Nothing," she said quickly. "I just want to go home." He nodded without arguing and walked beside her quietly as they headed back to the van. The ride home was silent. When they reached her building, she didn't look at him. "Thank you for tonight," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded. "You don't have to thank me." She turned away, fighting tears. "You don't understand." People were staring. "I could see it," he sighed softly. "Let them stare. They don't matter. They do to me," she said, her voice breaking. "I can't do this. I can't pretend I'm not different. You deserve someone who can walk beside you, not someone who slows you down." He looked at her for a long moment. His eyes were gentle but hurt. "You think I care about that? You think that's what this is about?" She couldn't answer. The fear inside her was louder than reason. She shook her head. "Please, just go." He opened his mouth as if to say something, but then he stopped. His face softened. "If that's what you want," he said quietly. "But for what it's worth, I don't see a woman in a wheelchair. I see someone who makes life feel right again." And then he left. When the sound of his truck faded away, the silence around her felt heavier than ever. She wheeled herself back inside, her chest tight. She knew she had pushed him away, but she couldn't help it. Her heart had been broken once before, and she couldn't bear the thought of it happening again. For days, she didn't hear from him. The text stopped, the call stopped. Her phone stayed silent, and her heart ached in that silence. She told herself it was for the best. That distance would help her forget. But it didn't. Everywhere she looked, she saw reminders of him. The coffee mug he brought, the plant by the window, the laugh that still echoed in her memory. She missed him more than she wanted to admit. One morning she tried to start her van, but it wouldn't start. The ramp was fine, but the engine refused to turn over. Normally she would have called him immediately. This time she sat there staring at her phone, unsure if she should. After a long pause, she sighed and dialed a different mechanic's number. But before she could finish explaining the problem, a familiar voice spoke from behind her. "Sounds like your battery's dead." She turned around in shock. He was standing there holding a small toolbox, his expression calm but kind. "I was passing by," he said. "Thought I'd check on you." Her throat tightened. "You didn't have to," he smiled faintly. "I know, but I wanted to." He opened the hood and got to work, silent except for the occasional sound of tools clicking. She watched him, trying to find the right words. When he finally finished, he closed the hood and looked at her. "Try it now." She turned the key and the engine roared to life. "Good as new," he said quietly. She stared at him for a moment. "Why are you so kind to me?" He looked at her, his eyes steady. "Because you deserve it. Because you've been through enough to know what real care feels like. And because I meant what I said, I don't see your chair." "I see you." Tears filled her eyes. She tried to speak, but her voice trembled. "I'm sorry. I pushed you away because I was scared." He stepped closer, his tone soft. "I know. You've been through things I can't imagine. But don't let fear steal what's good." For a long moment, neither of them said anything. The morning sun glowed softly between them. Finally, she whispered, "I missed you." He smiled, his eyes warm. "Then let's not waste more time missing each other." And for the first time in years, she felt something shift inside her. A quiet sense of peace. Maybe this was what healing truly looked like. Not pretending to be fine, but finding someone who saw the cracks and stayed anyway. She didn't know what the future would hold, but one thing was certain. He hadn't just fixed her van or her broken ramp. He was slowly fixing her heart, one honest moment at a time. The days grew warmer and the soft light of spring filled the small town. She had begun to feel a sense of normalcy she hadn't felt in years, not the old normal, but a new one. Life wasn't perfect, and her wheelchair was still a constant companion, but she no longer felt defined by it. She had someone who looked past the chair, someone who reminded her daily that her heart and her soul mattered more than her body. The mechanic had become part of her daily life, not in grand gestures but in quiet, consistent ways. He stopped by often, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with a small joke to make her laugh. They shared lunches, walked through the park with her wheelchair, and spent evenings talking about everything and nothing. His presence was steady, calm, and reassuring. Slowly, her heart had learned to open again. One morning, she received a call from him. "Want to come out today? There's a street fair by the river. Music, food, people selling crafts. I thought it might be fun." Her heart fluttered. Street fairs meant crowds, noise, people staring. She had avoided these situations for so long. But she had grown stronger in the weeks they had spent together, and she trusted him. "Okay," she said, smiling through a small tremor of nervousness. When they arrived, the air smelled sweet with baked goods and flowers. Children ran around laughing, and music floated through the warm air. He stayed close, guiding her wheelchair carefully, shielding her from sudden bumps in the crowd. His presence made her feel brave, as though the world wasn't quite as big and intimidating as it had seemed. They wandered through stalls, tasting pastries and listening to street musicians. People glanced at her, but his hand never left hers. It was the kind of protective, gentle touch that made her heart beat faster. She realized in that moment that she didn't want to hide anymore. She wanted to live, to be seen, to feel connected. At one point, they stopped near a small fountain where children were playing. She watched the water ripple and sparkle in the sunlight. He looked at her and said softly, "You know, I think you've taught me something too." She turned to him, surprised. "Me?" He nodded. "Yeah, you've shown me that strength isn't always about standing up. Sometimes it's about facing the world even when it's hard, even when you're afraid, and you do it with grace. You've helped me see what courage really looks like." Her chest warmed. No one had ever said such words to her before. Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them away. She wanted to smile, to laugh, to cry all at once. Thank you," she said softly. They sat for a while on a bench, the noise of the fair fading into the background. For a moment, she let herself forget everything else. The past pain, the broken relationships, the fear of being judged. All that existed was him, her, and the feeling of being truly seen. As the afternoon faded into evening, a street musician began to play a slow, soft melody. She hesitated, then looked at him. "Dance?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He smiled gently. Of course, they moved slowly to the music. She didn't stand. She didn't need to. They swayed together, her wheelchair moving in time with his steps. The world around them blurred, and for the first time in years, she felt completely at peace. After the music ended, he leaned closer. "You're incredible," he said softly. "You think so?" She whispered. "I know so," he replied. "I see your heart. That's what matters." She wanted to say something more, to tell him everything she had felt over the past months. The fear, the hope, the longing. But words seemed too small. Instead, she reached for his hand, letting her fingers intertwine with his. He held her gently, understanding more than any words could convey. The days that followed were filled with quiet, steady happiness. They spent time together in simple ways, sharing breakfasts, working on small projects, reading side by side. Life was not perfect, but it felt whole again. She began to realize that love didn't always need grand gestures. Sometimes it was found in laughter shared over coffee, in a hand held at the right moment, in the quiet assurance that someone cared without conditions. One afternoon, as they worked on a small repair in her van, he looked at her and said, "You know, I've been thinking." She paused, wiping her hands on a rag. "About what?" He smiled softly. "About how far we've come, how much you've grown, and how much I care about you." Her heart skipped. She had been waiting, hoping, fearing those words for months. "I care about you too," she admitted, her voice trembling. He reached out and gently touched her cheek. "You've opened me up in ways I didn't think were possible. I never believed I could feel this way again. But you've made me believe in happiness, in love, in second chances." Her eyes filled with tears, but they were not sad tears. They were relief, joy, and love all at once. "I've been so scared," she whispered. "Scared of being hurt again, scared of being too much." "You're not too much," he said firmly. "You're exactly who you are. Brave, kind, amazing. I see you, all of you, and I want to be here. Always." For the first time, she allowed herself to truly believe it. She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. The warmth of his presence, the honesty in his words, the kindness in his eyes. It all washed over her like a gentle tide. They spent the evening together, talking quietly, sharing memories, dreams, and laughter. She realized how much she had missed having someone who truly understood her, who saw beyond the wheelchair and the past pain. And he realized how much he had been waiting for someone like her, strong, gentle, and real. Over the next few weeks, their relationship grew naturally. Friends noticed the change in her, how she smiled more, how her eyes sparkled with life. He noticed changes in himself too, a lighter heart, a calmer mind, a new sense of hope. They didn't need grand adventures or fancy dates. Every small moment together was enough. One sunny afternoon, he invited her to the park again. They sat on a bench watching the clouds drift across the sky. His daughter ran nearby, laughing, and for a moment everything felt perfect. He turned to her, taking her hands in his. "Do you know what I love most about you?" She shook her head. "What?" "That you never gave up on yourself. That even when life tried to break you, you found a way to keep going. You've shown me that love isn't about perfection. It's about heart, trust, and being real." Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she smiled. "And you've shown me that people can care without judging, that there's still kindness in the world, that love can come even when we least expect it." He leaned closer, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You've fixed my heart too," he said softly. She laughed softly, a happy, free sound. "Then I guess we fixed each other." From that day on, they no longer spoke in hesitations or doubts. They were together in the quiet, steady way that only true love allows. Not rushed, not dramatic, but filled with understanding, patience, and warmth. Months later, as she looked back on the journey she had taken, from pain, loneliness, and fear to laughter, hope, and love, she realized something profound. Her wheelchair had never been a curse. It had been part of her story, yes, but it had never defined her. What mattered was her courage to keep going, and the courage to open her heart again. He had seen her when she felt invisible. He had stayed when she thought she was unworthy. And through him, she had learned the most important lesson. Love doesn't always fix everything, but it can make broken hearts whole again. They continued their life together, simple but full. They laughed, worked, and dreamed side by side. Sometimes, when they were alone, he would gently hold her hands and remind her, "You are enough. You always were." And she believed him. She didn't walk again, and perhaps she never would. But that no longer mattered, because she had found something greater than mobility. She had found someone who loved her for all that she was, someone who helped her see that life could still be beautiful, still be joyful, still be filled with love. In the quiet of her apartment, as she looked out at the sunset one evening, she felt her heart full in a way it had never been before. She realized that real strength isn't just in standing or walking. It's in facing life, embracing love, and trusting someone enough to let them in. And in him, she had found that love. The world had not been kind to her, but through one man's patience, understanding, and unwavering care, she had learned to heal. Not just from the past, not just from pain, but from fear itself. Her heart, once broken and closed, was now open. And as she leaned back in her wheelchair, his hand resting over hers, she smiled, knowing that she was finally home, in her life, in her heart, and in love.